Cool. I'm here to talk to you quite a broad level of a decade of TV development at the BBC, kind of what we did, what we believe we got right, what we believe we maybe got wrong, and kind of where we're heading, or at least we think we're heading that way, but like most things, these things evolve. So I'm roughly going to try and cover 2012 all the way to 2023 in 15 minutes or so. It's going to be quite quick, quite fast-paced, willing to dig into details afterwards. I'm going to cheat a little bit, though. We're going to start with today and just have a quick overview of kind of what we do today. So TV at the BBC now, it kind of fundamentally forms two products. One, our main one, BBC iPlayer, and the other one is BBC Sounds. They both run in a traditional web stack, HTML, JavaScript, CSS. iPlayer was launched all the way back in 2008, I believe, and Sounds in 2020. Quite a new one. We've had other applications in between then and now, but they've disappeared. One interesting thing, though, we support tons of devices, at least over 1,000, I believe, and they all vary. This chart here kind of graphs devices from 2010 all the way up to 2023. You can see pretty much even distribution kind of each year now. We're kind of onboarding a lot of devices to the platform. Another thing to note is it's constantly growing. iPlayer's grew every year since it's been around, and Sounds is growing as well. Smaller product, but it's growing all the same. And our users tend to distribute in this kind of fashion. So while the devices may be evenly distributed in terms of releases each year, our users generally aren't. And I think a few people have said about, people just don't go out and buy a new TV or such, like the lifespan of these things is a bit longer. 2016 tends to prop up quite a lot of our user base. That is the year streaming sticks start to become mainstream, so that tends to stick around. So with the history, we'll start in 2012. We had a single iPlayer application. This box is quite deceiving, because in truth, back then we had an AS2 application, an AS3 application, a broadcast-based application running on something called Mayhem, which if any of you have written, I do apologize. But eventually we did converge on this web technology approach, and 2012 was kind of where it became big for us. It was a big year for iPlayer, and it looked something like this. Probably slightly less pixelated, I hope, back then. But it was a really big year for the BBC because it was the Olympics. It was a big thing in the UK, London 2012 Olympics, and it was the start of what we call in the BBC, and we've got a lot of three-letter acronyms in this talk. I do apologise. It's like a AWS service catalogue, but it was the start of Odd for us, which is Olympic-driven development. And we wanted to build a sports application for TV. We had iPlayer, and we were like, you know what? It's 2012. We want to build this new app. What we're going to do, we're going to rip the guts out of iPlayer and all that good stuff we've got captured in there, and we're going to make it into a framework. And then we can build out sounds on it, and we can open source it too for others to use. I think some other people used it, probably not here today. Hopefully you enjoyed your time with it. But this is deprecated as of last year. As of last year, although I think in truth, a few years before. But yeah, this framework kind of contained all the device abstractions. You're talking about there, like you want to do something simple on a TV, right? And you do it in your browser, you do web.close and the browser closes. That's amazing. But on a TV, you do web.close and it moves your divs around the page or something like that. And so what Tal was trying to do was, the application developer do application.exit, and that's great. And the Tal framework will figure out what device you're on and call the appropriate API, web.close, window.exit, or window.partner function, and you pass it your mother's maiden name and last three bank digits or something like that. But basically, it took the device specifics away, or at least that's what I attempted to do. And it was a good thing. We launched Sport. We had this for the Olympics. It was a great app. Design's not dated so well, but this was around for the Olympics, really good. And also, soon after, we launched a news application, also written on Tal. Interesting note about this application was it was written by an external agency for us, so it kind of looked a bit different in visuals, but also looked completely different in the code. But they all ran on Tal, so fortunately, they ran across a lot of devices. So 2012, really for us, was this big year where Tal came around, and iPlayer got some new friends. It got sport and news. And it was a good year, big Olympic Games. 2014, however, our application started to diverge a bit. We kind of sorted out this device quirks, but the application structures themselves and how we render the UI was fundamentally different in all three of these applications, especially news, as I mentioned earlier, that was built by somebody else. Not that made it any worse, just different. So we had another three-letter project, because that's what we like to do, called TAP. This one wasn't open source, but this was an attempt at us at unifying kind of our view technology and how we render TV applications and then the view in the browser. So effectively what happened was we got rid of sport and we got rid of news. And like most things, we take iPlayer to start with and we make that TAP. And this is our new platform. And we make all the applications like that. And it looked pretty good. The code was consistent. People all of a sudden could probably work between all the products. And for some reason, iPlayer looked like this, and then sport suddenly looked like iPlayer. And then news looked like iPlayer, but at least everyone could work across them all. And TAP did solve loads of problems for us. It allowed us to kind of iterate quite quickly on those products back then. But it became very niche, and those of you that work in TV and TV browsers in particular will know, like, you end up in this like custom domain. You're 2 weeks deep in Dash Docs or whatever. And people just fundamentally maybe aren't that as interested to work on it, and we want to attract people to come work here, right? Great place to work. Sometimes the platform has its difficulties. So while TAP solved the view for us, it became this big monolithic application with all these products within it, and it started to gain complexity. Weirdly, we didn't have a logo for the TAP project, so I asked some tool on the internet to generate me one. I said, combined iPlayer, sport, and news branding. I think we're not quite in danger of losing our jobs to the robots just yet. So in 2016, we said, you know what, TAP's great, TALS seems okay, but fundamentally, people come and work for us, and they're like, this is all custom, it's low level, I don't really want to read the Dash Docs. I know some people like that. But so we had this project Mayhem, not a three-letter acronym, I know, so trendy. And the aim of this project was to kind of start and use more modern off-the-shelf libraries. So when web developers come and work at the BBC, oh, I get this, I understand this, I did a bit of this. In 2016, there was this framework at the time, React, which was pretty popular. And we were like, this is a great idea, isn't it? We'll use React and we'll get all the brilliant web devs to come and work for us. It'd be great. But as we all know, that wasn't going to work. But, however, it did work on the server. So, like all good people, we knew where our problems were, and we just ran away from them. And we went to the server, and we delivered all our, at least a majority of our views in an SSR-like fashion. I think calling it true SSR would probably be an overstatement at this point, but this is where kind of we were in 2016. We'd off-sited most of our view composition up into the cloud, and we still use TAP to piece it together on the client, and then TAL to fundamentally make it work on the TVs. And it was a good time. We made this new version of iPlayer, and we add this little person up here, which allows you to sign in, and personalization. That was a wonderful project. You think rendering's bad on TV, wait till you're trying to do security on TVs. But fundamentally, the core application still relied on TAP and TAL. And there was somewhat starting to date, and we were somewhat ready for a change, I guess. So 2019 came along, and with 2019, also a new product. So BBC Sounds, which I mentioned at the start, is kind of the audio offering on TV. And it's kind of the cool hip kid of the BBC products. And it had this attitude that it didn't want to do TAP and TAL, and we want to do this a bit different. And also at the time, Spot and News kind of were decommissioned, which left TAP in this state of, it was now a single application, it wasn't really a platform, it just had a single product in there. And naturally you'd go, you know what, we have this pattern, we've done this in the past, we'll just have another mountain. A mountain is what we call our services in TV for some reason. We made a generator and it's called Molehill, so naturally the thing it generates is called a mountain, isn't it? That'd be our standard approach, right? We spin up a SSR service and we kind of shoehorn it into TAP, and we accept that there's some debt there, but most of it's done for us. But we took a different approach with sounds, and we said, you know what, we'll start with out, tap, and tal, and rather than jumping into the big ball of all sorts going on, we'll step aside and we'll just trim the things from the ball as we need them and aim to ship an application onto TVs that way. But we weren't, you know, that naive. We've been around TV a lot, and we knew that devices just don't play very well generally, do they? And we knew that all that logic captured in tap and tal, like, it looked a mess, but it worked, and it was great for us. And so, yeah, the logic we wanted was inside tap and tal. So our TV application at the time was kind of, everyone framed it as this like Lego blocks. So what we did in sounds was we stole them from tap and tal, and we made all these blocks, and this was this TTR project. It was the idea that we'd end up with a ton of blocks to build TV applications from, and we called these TV modules. And these were like ECMAScript modules that were plug and play in most cases, and we ended up with ones like exit strategies, like I mentioned earlier, but there was also ones around how you integrate with our MVT provider to do A/B tests, or how you send stats to our stats provider, telemetry for operations, and all sorts of stuff. We made all sorts of cool stuff. One particularly good thing, which we actually open source now, is the LRUD library. So anyone that wants to do spatial navigation on a TV, we spent best part of probably a decade building manual navigation trees and having focus management declared that way. This is a cool tool. It kind of measures on screen what's focusable, and it applies focus for you, and it does all wonderful things. So we don't have to write navigation trees in TV anymore, which definitely is cool. But this is where we kind of ended up. So we ended up in this disparate place where we've got sounds off on the right doing its own thing. We've got all this SSR stuff where we ended up with each SSR mountain was delivering a part of the experience. And the playback team also went and did some work in SnapDOM, a VDOM library, and made all our playback controls work in the client. And you know, there's tons of good work in that space where it's the first time we've really kind of used VDOMs on TV. If anyone's tried to do that kind of thing, generally it's quite difficult, right? TVs aren't quite performant enough. But that's kind of where we went to. And then we get to last year, and we decided, you know what? We've unified the way we do device abstractions. We put all that valuable logic from TAL into these modules, and we have a big mono repo now full of them. And we also have these little Lego bricks of logic, like MVT. We want a way to unify our rendering solution. So, you know, bits of it isn't client-side, bits of it isn't server-side. One's using a VDOM, one's using, in sounds we're using like ES6 template literal strings, and we're transpiling them to concatenation statements on the device for support. We went in a unified way, so we kind of said, well, we've got all the building blocks for building the TV app, right? We just need to carry on with our strategy and find a way to unify the rendering so it works in all these browsers that we work so hard to, you know, be consistent with. I spoke at the start about all those range of devices, and we have a really good certification team that basically, you know, certify those browsers behave as we expect, and we've got an automation tool called ACT, three-letter acronym, of course, that allows us to like profile the device. If anyone's ever played a game and it says like play this in high definition or play this with this feature flag, and we have a tool that somewhat gives us that printout, right, and it allows us to feature flag. I think you were speaking about feature toggling off thumbnails. We've definitely had that problem too. So we picked a new set of tools for this UI, and we've gone with Preact. This kind of gives us the finished VDOM, like abstraction over the DOM. It gives us like actual real events that hook into the DOM rather than like synthetic ones that come with something like React. And fundamentally, it's lightweight, it's supported, it's natively ES3, and it runs everywhere. We ran this in a lot of our automated testing stuff, and it runs on all our devices, which is great. But running, or at least being syntactically correct and performing, are probably two different things. And oh yeah, and you know, we want to support all these devices. It's all right us going, I tell you what, we've got this new modern library and this new framework to do cool web dev, but we're just going to kill all these devices down here. We're trying to avoid that. So we tread carefully, I guess, with the VDOM approach. But fortunately for us, Pret brings signals. And for those that work, signals are kind of a lightweight, reactive state primitive. And Pret have this baked in, and it gives us really lightweight reactivity. It means we can not cause big re-render flows through our component trees when we want to update, I don't know, media state or something, right? So Preactors give us those tools, and that's kind of where we're heading, basically. So we set off down with this project called Telly, where we unify our platform. We end up with a load of new tools. We built a design system. We use Storybook and a tool called Chromatic to visually detect changes in our components. And we could kind of build those components in isolation. We keep saying we're going to make like a storybook for TV so people could see the components rendered across TVs, but we haven't quite got there yet. And fundamentally, that means that we're hoping we can condense all these kind of different view rendering approaches we've got here on the right down into a more simple one, like this, where we have Telly, which contains Preact in our view layer. And that's underpinned fundamentally by what was Tap and Tal, but has evolved into our newer TV modules that contain device abstractions and kind of business logic. Now, there's a catch. We say we've done all that. We haven't actually done all that, as in, like, it's not live yet. But it will be this year. I think there was ambition to try and release the first part of it this week, but I think we're a few weeks maybe off. But this year, we intend to roll out this new kind of Telly framework, Preact, that's underpinned by all the great stuff we've done over the last decade, I guess. And that kind of comes back to zooming out for the decade and saying, well, you know, what have we learned? And I think that our main lessons are, don't always assume the thing you did originally was wrong, because we moved to a monolithic style application and we broke it all apart. And we learned loads by breaking it apart, but solidifying those wins and moving more to what we're kind of calling like a monolith or a module lift, if that's a better word, is kind of where we're heading today. And that is pretty much me. Any questions?